The final battle began at dawn over Verdania, as both fleets committed everything they had to the fight. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching as Korthak ships moved into their attack formation. The enemy had learned from their earlier defeats and now approached more cautiously, but Carter could see the determination in their movements. This would be their last chance to claim victory. All ships, execute attack pattern Delta, Carter ordered. Target their command ships first. We take out their leadership and the rest will follow. The human fleet moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Ships that had fought together for years now coordinated their attacks perfectly. Commander Davis led his destroyer group in a flanking maneuver, while Captain Morrison's heavy cruisers provided covering fire. The modified weapons that Engineer Tucker had developed proved devastatingly effective as Korthak shields failed under precisely timed attacks. But the Korthak had numbers on their side, and War Prince Gorthak Rex was determined to use every advantage. His flagship, the Skull Crusher, led a direct assault on the human command vessel. The massive Korthak battleship dwarfed the UES Liberty, its weapons capable of destroying smaller ships with single shots. On Verdania's surface, the ground battle reached its climax as Korthak forces launched their final assault on the civilian population centers. Colonel Santos found herself facing an impossible decision. Her forces were spread thin across multiple defensive positions, and the enemy was threatening to break through in several places at once. All units fall back to secondary positions, she ordered reluctantly. We're consolidating around the civilian shelters. If they want to get to the innocents, they'll have to go through all of us. The withdrawal was one of the most difficult maneuvers in military tactics, requiring discipline and coordination under extreme pressure. Human Marines fought desperate holding actions to allow their comrades to reach the new positions. Corporal Fisher's squad held a critical bridge for 30 minutes against overwhelming odds, allowing hundreds of Zilani civilians to reach safety before finally falling back themselves. But as the human forces consolidated their defenses, something unexpected happened. The Zilani, who had watched their protectors fight and die for them, decided they could no longer stand aside. Young engineer Talaves was the first to act, using her knowledge of the city's power grid to create energy barriers that protected human positions. I cannot fight as you do, she told Lieutenant Morgan, but I can use our technology to help you fight. Her example spread quickly through the Zilani population. Dr. Morikhan began coordinating with human medical teams to treat wounded Marines with advanced Zilani healing technology. Other Zilani engineers worked to modify the city's communication systems, giving human forces better coordination than they had ever achieved before. The partnership between the two species created something neither had expected. Human tactical skill combined with Zilani technological advancement produced defensive capabilities that surprised everyone, including the attacking Korthak forces. Energy shields that could stop enemy fire appeared around human positions, while communication networks allowed perfect coordination of defensive efforts. In orbit, the space battle had become a brutal slugging match between the remaining ships of both fleets. Admiral Carter's flagship was taking heavy damage from the Korthak command vessel, but she refused to withdraw. If the UES Liberty fell, human coordination would suffer, and the entire defense would collapse. Ma'am, we're losing. Power to the main weapons, reported her tactical officer. Hull breach is on decks 7 through 12. We can't take much more of this. Carter studied the tactical display, looking for any advantage she could use. The Korthak flagship was heavily damaged as well, but it was still functional and still dangerous. Then she saw something that made her smile grimly. Helm, set course directly for the enemy flagship, she ordered. Full speed. Admiral, that's a collision course, her navigator warned. I know, Carter replied calmly. Signal all hands to prepare for ramming speed. War Prince Gorthak Rex watched the human command ship accelerate toward his vessel and felt something he had never experienced before, genuine fear. These humans were willing to destroy themselves to stop him. No sane species would sacrifice their command ship in such a desperate gambit. But these deathworlders seemed to operate by different rules entirely. At the last moment, Carter ordered her ship to change course slightly, bringing the UES Liberty alongside the Korthak flagship rather than ramming it directly. As the two vessels scraped together in a shower of sparks and debris, human boarding parties led by Marines like Sergeant Brown crossed between the ships and began fighting their way toward the enemy bridge. The corridors of the Skull Crusher became a battleground as human Marines faced Korthak warriors in close combat. The aliens were larger and stronger, but the humans fought with a ferocity that came from knowing that innocent lives depended on their success. Brown led her squad through deck after deck of enemy territory, leaving destruction in their wake. Meanwhile, on Verdania's surface, the combined human-Zilani defense was holding against the final Korthak assault. The energy barriers created by Zilani technology channeled enemy forces into killing fields where human weapons could be most effective. Colonel Santos coordinated the defense from a command post that was itself protected by a Zilani force field. "They're breaking," reported Lieutenant Hayes, watching her sensor displays. "Enemy forces are falling back from sectors 7 and 9. "Confirmed," added Lieutenant Morgan. "The Korthak ground commander just ordered a general withdrawal to their landing sites." The turning point had come not from superior firepower or numbers, but from the unity between two very different species. Humans provided the tactical knowledge and fighting spirit, while Zilani contributed technological advantages and unwavering support. Together, they had created something that neither could have achieved alone. Aboard the Skull Crusher, Admiral Carter found herself face-to-face with War Prince Gorthak Rex in his command center. The massive Korthak leader towered over her, his forearms ending in claws that could easily tear a human apart. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw something that made him hesitate. "You have lost, human," he snarled. "Your ship is dying. Your forces are outnumbered. Surrender now, and I might allow some of your species to live as slaves." Carter smiled, and Gorthak Rex realized that this small, fragile-looking creature showed no fear at all. "You still don't understand, do you?" she said quietly. "We didn't come here to conquer or to gain anything for ourselves. We came here to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. And we've already won." The War Prince looked at his tactical displays and saw the truth of her words. His ground forces were retreating, his fleet was scattered and broken, and his flagship was crippled. But more than that, he had learned something about human nature that terrified him. These beings would sacrifice everything, including their own lives, to protect others. "Your empire conquers through fear," Carter continued. "But you can't frighten people who are more afraid of failing the innocent than they are of dying." Gorthak Rex attacked then, his warrior instincts overriding his strategic mind. But Carter had not survived 20 years in the military by being unprepared. The fight was brief and decisive, ending with the War Prince defeated and his command, structure in collapse. As news of their leader's defeat spread through the Korthak fleet, resistance crumbled. Ship after ship signaled surrender or began withdrawing from the system. The few vessels that attempted to continue fighting found themselves overwhelmed by the coordinated human-Zilani defense. In the days that followed, as the last Korthak forces limped away from Verdania, the galaxy began to process what had happened. A peaceful species had been saved from extinction by warriors from a deathworld, and in the process, both species had been changed forever. The Zilani, inspired by human courage, began developing their own defensive capabilities while maintaining their peaceful nature. They would never become warriors themselves, but they would never again be helpless in the face of aggression. Ambassador Keela Rin stood with Admiral Carter on the observation deck of the UES Liberty, looking down at Verdania's crystal cities gleaming in the sunlight. The planet showed scars from the battle, but it was alive and free. "How can we ever thank you for what you have done?" Keela Rin asked. Carter shook her head. "Thanks aren't necessary. This is what humans do. We help those who need help." "But why?" the Zilani ambassador pressed. "What do you gain from risking so much for strangers?" Carter thought for a moment, then smiled. "We gain the knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy, there are people living free because we were willing to fight for them. That's enough." A few weeks later, Captain Morrison was back at his post aboard the UES Defiance when a new priority message arrived. Another distress call from another distant world. another peaceful species facing extinction from aggressive conquerors. Without hesitation, he forwarded the message to Admiral Carter and began preparing his ship for departure. The galaxy had learned something new about the humans from the deathworld called Earth. They were indeed dangerous, but their danger was reserved for those who threatened the innocent. For those who needed protection, the Korthak fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts, their massive ships blotting out the stars as they moved toward Verdania. War Prince Gorthak Rex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Skull Crusher, and studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. 212 warships under his command, enough firepower to reduce a planet to ash within hours. But something was wrong. His sensors were detecting unknown vessels in orbit around the target world. The ships were smaller than his own but clearly military in design. Intelligence reports had said nothing about Verdania having defensive capabilities or allies willing to fight for them. Communications officer, Gorthak Rex growled, his scarred face twisting into what might have been a smile. Open a channel to the unknown fleet. Let's see who dares to interfere with Korthak expansion. Admiral Carter received the incoming transmission aboard the UES Liberty and immediately recognized the aggressive posture of the alien vessel on her screen. The creature addressing her was clearly built for war. Gorthak Rex stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body covered in natural armor plates with forearms that ended in clawed hands. His eyes glowed red with predatory hunger. "I am War Prince Gorthak Rex of the Korthak Empire," the alien announced. "You are trespassing in space that belongs to us by right of conquest. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed with the prey species you foolishly try to protect." Carter stepped forward, her own image now filling Gorthak Rex's screen. Where the Korthak commander was massive and intimidating, she appeared small and fragile, but when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to command. "I'm Admiral Lisa Carter of the Earth Defense Force. These people are under our protection now. If you want them, you'll have to go through us first." Gorthak Rex actually laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal, ending. "Humans. I have heard stories of your species, primitive deathworlders who think violence solves everything. Your tiny fleet will be destroyed in minutes, and then we will enslave your world as well." "You're welcome to try," Carter replied calmly, then cut the transmission. The War Prince immediately ordered his fleet to attack formation. In his experience, intimidation worked on most species. Those few who resisted usually surrendered after witnessing Korthak firepower. He had never encountered a species that remained calm when facing overwhelming odds. The battle began when Korthak fighter squadrons launched from their carriers, expecting to sweep aside any resistance. Instead, they met human pilots who had trained for exactly this kind of engagement. Commander Tony Wells led his squadron in a series of hit-and-run attacks that confused the Korthak formations. Captain Susan Reed used her fighters' superior maneuverability to target the enemy's larger but slower craft. The space battle quickly developed into something the Korthak had never experienced. Human tactics focused on speed and unpredictability, rather than brute force. Ships like Captain Morrison's UES Defiance used gravity slingshots around Verdania's moon to appear behind enemy formations, striking at vulnerable points before disappearing again. On the surface, Colonel Santos was coordinating the ground defenses when the first Korthak assault shuttles entered the atmosphere. The enemy craft were heavily armored and bristling with weapons, but they flew in predictable attack patterns that human forces had studied and prepared for. "All units, this is Colonel Santos," she announced over the communication network. "The enemy is coming in fast and low over the eastern districts. Stick to your training and remember what we're fighting for." The Korthak ground assault was meant to be simple and brutal. Land overwhelming force, crush any resistance, and begin the process of enslaving the population. But as their shuttles approached the landing zones, they encountered something they had never faced before: coordinated human resistance. Corporal Mike Fisher led his squad in an ambush that destroyed 3 enemy shuttles before they could land. His men used portable missile launchers and placed explosives to turn the Korthak landing zone into a killing field. When enemy soldiers finally reached the ground, they found themselves facing humans who fought with a desperation and skill that shocked them. The Korthak were experienced warriors, but they fought for glory and conquest. Humans fought for survival and to protect innocence. The difference showed immediately in the intensity of the combat. Lieutenant Carol Hayes coordinated artillery strikes that prevented Korthak forces from forming up properly. Her targeting was so precise that enemy units found themselves scattered and confused within minutes of landing. But the real surprise came when engineer Ben Tucker, working with Zilani scientist Morikon, made a crucial discovery about Korthak technology. The enemy ships used energy shields that seemed impenetrable, but Tucker noticed something odd about their frequency patterns. Their shields pulse at regular intervals, Tucker explained to Morikon as they studied captured sensor data. There's a brief gap every few seconds when the energy levels drop. Morikon's large eyes widened with understanding. If we could time our weapons to fire during those gaps? Exactly, Tucker grinned. We just need to modify our targeting computers to recognize the pattern. Within hours, human engineers across the fleet were implementing Tucker's discovery. The effect was immediate and devastating. Korthak ships that had seemed invulnerable suddenly found their shields failing under precisely timed human attacks. The tide of the space battle began to turn. War Prince Gorthak Rex watched his tactical displays with growing disbelief. His forces were being systematically outfought by a smaller enemy fleet. These humans used tactics he had never seen before, combining technology with an understanding of warfare that seemed almost instinctive. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded of his tactical officer. 17 destroyed, 34 damaged. Sir, the humans are targeting our shield generators with some kind of modified weapons. Gorthak Rex's 4 hands clenched into fists. In over 50 campaigns, he had never faced an enemy that could match Korthak aggression with superior skill. These humans were forcing him to fight a different kind of war, one where raw power meant less than intelligence and adaptability. On Verdania's surface, the ground battle was becoming equally desperate. Korthak forces had managed to establish several beachheads, but they found themselves trapped in urban combat against an enemy that knew the terrain better and fought with suicidal determination. Sergeant Brown led her Marines in a series of running battles through the Crystal City, using the Zilani architecture to their advantage. The peaceful Zilani watched their beautiful city become a battlefield and struggled to understand what they were witnessing. These humans who looked so small and fragile compared to the massive Korthak warriors were somehow winning through sheer determination and tactical superiority. Young Talaves found herself working directly with human forces, using her knowledge of the city's systems to help coordinate defenses. She watched Lieutenant Morgan lead a squad against overwhelming odds to protect a civilian shelter, and began to understand something about human nature that no Zilani had ever comprehended before. They don't fight because they enjoy it, she realized, speaking to her mentor Mora Khan over their communication link. They fight because they cannot bear to see innocents suffer. As the day wore on, both sides prepared for what would clearly be the decisive engagement. The Korthak still had superior numbers, but human forces had proven they could match the enemy in skill and exceed them in determination. The question now was whether courage and tactical brilliance could overcome raw firepower. War Prince Gorthak Rex made his decision. He would commit everything to one final assault. Either he would crush these impossible humans or he would die trying. In the depths of space, Korthak ships moved into attack formation for what would be the largest battle the galaxy had seen in generations. Admiral Carter watched the enemy preparations and knew that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of Verdania, but possibly the future balance of power in the galaxy. She opened a communication channel to all human forces, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they faced. "All hands, this is Admiral Carter. The enemy is preparing their final attack. They're going to throw everything they have at us, and they expect us to break. They don't understand that we're human, and humans don't break when we're protecting innocent people. Today we show the galaxy what that means." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Verdania system, with the precision that came from years of military training. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the tactical displays as her ships spread into formation. What she saw made her jaw tighten with anger. 3 Korthak scout ships were already in the system, moving between the outer planets and conducting detailed scans of Verdania itself. They were mapping the planet's defenses and population centers, preparing for the main assault. Commander Davis, aboard the destroyer UES Vanguard, requested permission to engage immediately. Granted, Admiral Carter said simply, but make it clean. We don't want them sending a warning back to their fleet. The engagement was over in minutes. The Korthak scouts were fast and well-armed, but they weren't expecting to face human military technology. Commander Davis led his ship in a series of attack runs that confused and overwhelmed the enemy vessels. Within 10 minutes, all 3 scout ships had been destroyed, their wreckage drifting silently through space. That should buy us some time, Davis reported. But they'll be missed eventually. Admiral Carter nodded. Long enough to get our people on the ground. Colonel Santos, you're clear for landing operations. On Verdania's surface, Ambassador Kayla Rin stood at the window of her office, watching the sky with nervous hope. She had received a brief message from the human fleet announcing their arrival, but she still couldn't quite believe that help had actually come. When the first human shuttles appeared in the morning sky, her heart raced with a mixture of relief and terror. The landing craft were nothing like Zilani vehicles. Where Zilani ships were smooth and graceful, human shuttles were angular and practical. They looked like flying weapons, designed for war rather than art. As they descended toward the capital city's main plaza, crowds of curious Zilani gathered to watch. The first shuttle touched down with a mechanical hiss, and its ramp lowered to reveal the humans inside. Colonel Santos stepped out first, her combat armor dark and intimidating. Behind her came a squad of Marines, each one carrying weapons that looked capable of destroying buildings. The Zilani stepped back instinctively, suddenly understanding why these beings were called deathworlders. But when Colonel Santos removed her helmet, the Zilani saw something unexpected. Her face was stern but not cruel, and her eyes showed concern rather than aggression. She approached Ambassador Kellerin slowly, her hands visible and empty of weapons. "Ambassador," Santos said in carefully pronounced Standard Galactic, "I'm Colonel Maria Santos of the Earth Defense Force. We received your message and we're here to help." Kellerin studied the human woman before her. Santos was shorter than most Zilani but somehow gave the impression of being much larger. Her movements were controlled and precise, like a predator that had chosen not to strike. When she spoke, her voice was respectful but carried an undertone of barely contained violence. "We are grateful beyond words," Kellerin replied. "But I must warn you, the Korthak Empire has ships and weapons that could destroy your entire fleet. Are you certain you wish to face such danger for people you barely know?" Santos smiled, and for the first time, Kellerin saw genuine warmth in the human's expression. "Ma'am, we came here to help you, and that's exactly what we're going to do. The Korthak can bring whatever they want, we'll be ready." As more shuttles landed, the cultural differences between humans and Zilani became immediately apparent. Lieutenant Pete Morgan began working with Zilani engineer Tala Vess to establish defensive positions around the city. The young Zilani watched in amazement as Morgan sketched out plans for fortifications and weapon emplacements. "These barriers will protect your people when the shooting starts," Morgan explained, pointing to his rough diagrams. "We'll position them to give us clear fields of fire while keeping civilians safe." Talaves studied the plans with growing horror. "You intend to fight them in our city, among our homes and children?" "Only if we have to," Morgan replied. "But if they make it to the surface, we'll stop them here rather than let them spread across your world." The conversation was typical of many happening across the city. The Zilani were a people who resolved conflicts through discussion and compromise. The idea of violence, especially violence in their peaceful communities, was almost incomprehensible to them. But as they watched the humans work, they began to understand that these aliens thought very differently about protection and survival. Sergeant Lisa Brown was setting up a communications post when a group of young Zilani approached her. They moved with the innocent curiosity that seemed universal among children, regardless of species. The smallest one, barely reaching Brown's waist, asked why she carried so many weapons. Because sometimes bad people try to hurt good people, Brown explained, kneeling down to the child's level. And when that happens, someone needs to stop them. But why you? The young Zilani asked. Why do you help people you don't know? Brown thought for a moment, looking at the child's large silver eyes. Because that's what good people do. We help each other. Across the city, Dr. Amy Johnson was setting up medical facilities and making a disturbing discovery about Zilani physiology. The peaceful aliens were incredibly fragile by human standards. What would be a minor bruise to a human could cause serious internal injury to a Zilani. A fall that a human child might laugh off could be fatal to a Zilani adult. My God, Johnson muttered to her assistant. These people are like living glass sculptures. No wonder they never developed a military culture. The revelation spread quickly through the human forces, and the reaction was immediate. Orders went out that all interactions with Zilani civilians should be conducted with extreme care. More importantly, the knowledge that these gentle beings were so vulnerable made every human soldier even more determined to protect them. As the day progressed, Zilani satellites detected the approaching Korthak main fleet. The numbers were staggering. Over 200 warships, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything in the human fleet. When Ambassador Kellerin shared this information with Admiral Carter, she expected to see fear or doubt in the human commander's eyes. Instead, Carter simply nodded and began issuing orders to her fleet. Signal all ships to battle readiness. Begin deploying defensive satellites around Verdania. And get me a direct line to the Korthak fleet commander. Admiral, Kellerin said hesitantly, surely you understand that your fleet cannot possibly defeat such a force. Perhaps it would be better to evacuate as many of my people as possible before they arrive. Carter turned to face the Zilani ambassador, and Kellerin saw something in the human's eyes that she had never seen before. It wasn't fear or desperation. It was the cold, calculating look of a predator that had chosen its prey. Ambassador, Carter said quietly, we didn't come here to run away. We came here to win. As night fell over Verdania, the peaceful planet prepared for war. In orbit, human ships moved into defensive positions while their crews ran final weapons checks. Ondi, the surface Marines and Zilani worked together to prepare for the coming battle. And in the depths of space, the Korthak fleet continued its relentless approach, unaware that they were about to face an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. The galaxy's most peaceful species and its most dangerous were now united in common cause. Tomorrow would show the universe what happened when humanity's deathworlders chose to protect the innocent. The morning light fell soft and golden across the crystal towers of Verdania, as Ambassador Kellerin received the message that would change everything. She stood in her office high above the peaceful city, watching her people go about their daily lives below. Children played in the gardens while adults tended to their art and science. None of them knew that death was coming from the stars. The communication device on her desk glowed with urgent red light. The message came from the deep space monitoring station at the edge of their solar system. Kellerin touched the device with her slender blue fingers and felt her heart sink as the words appeared. The Korthak Empire had been spotted moving towards Zilani space. Their massive war fleet was only months away. Kellerin closed her large silver eyes and tried to calm herself. The Zilani had always been a peaceful people. They had no armies, no weapons of war, no knowledge of how to fight. Their entire civilization was built on harmony and understanding. They created beautiful art, studied the mysteries of the universe, and lived in peace with all living things. Now that peace was about to be shattered. She walked to the window and looked down at the city. The buildings were made of living crystal that grew from the ground like trees. Gardens connected every structure, and streams of clear water flowed between them. It was a paradise that had taken thousands of years to build. In a few months, it would all be gone. The Korthak Empire was known throughout the galaxy for its cruelty. They conquered world after world, enslaving entire species and turning beautiful planets into mining operations. They took children from their families and forced them to work in terrible conditions. They destroyed everything that was good and beautiful in the galaxy. And now they were coming for the Zilani, Kellerin activated the emergency protocols and sent messages to the Galactic Council. Within hours, she was standing before the Great Assembly Hall on the neutral world of Nexus Prime. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their assigned seats, their faces showing concern but not alarm. The Galactic Council had dealt with the Korthak threat before by simply avoiding them. She stood at the center of the hall and began to speak. Her voice was soft and musical, the way all Zilani voices were, but it carried clearly through the chamber. She told them about the approaching fleet and begged for help. She explained that her people had no way to defend themselves and that millions of innocent lives hung in the balance. The response was exactly what she had feared. The Altarian representative spoke first, his forearms gesturing dismissively. The Altarians had powerful ships but claimed they were needed to defend their own borders. The crystalline beings from Terminus offered to accept Zilani refugees but said they could not risk war with the Korthak. One by one, each species found reasons to avoid getting involved. Hours passed as the debate continued. Some representatives seemed genuinely sorry but insisted their hands were tied. Others barely bothered to hide their indifference. The Velthari delegate, High Counselor Zexmorn, actually suggested that the Zilani should surrender immediately to avoid unnecessary suffering. His cold reptilian eyes showed no emotion as he spoke about accepting slavery as the natural order. As the sun set over Nexus Prime, Kellerin realized that no help would come from the Council. These advanced civilizations with their powerful technologies and vast fleets would do nothing to save her people. They would offer words of sympathy and promises to remember the Zilani fondly, but they would not risk their own safety to help. That night, alone in her quarters, Kellerin made a decision that shocked even herself. She activated her personal communication system and began searching through the galactic database for any species that might help. Most of the entries were familiar, but one caught her attention. It was marked with warning symbols and listed as a restricted contact. The entry was for a world called Earth. She read the file with growing amazement. Earth was listed as a Class 12 deathworld, one of the most dangerous planets ever catalogued. Its gravity was crushing, its weather was violent, and deadly creatures roamed its surface. The dominant species called themselves humans, and they were described as aggressive, unpredictable, and extremely dangerous. Most civilized species avoided contact with them entirely, but as Kellerin read deeper, she found something interesting. In every recorded encounter, humans had shown a strange tendency to help others, even at great cost to themselves. There were reports of human ships rescuing the crews of enemy vessels during battles, stories of humans sharing their food with prisoners of war, account after account of humans doing things that made no logical sense from a survival perspective. The more she read, the more convinced she became. These humans from the deathworld might be her people's only hope. They were violent and dangerous, but they seemed to have something that the advanced civilizations lacked. They cared about others, even strangers. With shaking hands, Kellerin composed a message. She poured her heart into the words, describing her people's desperate situation and begging for help. She told them about Zilani children who would grow up in chains if no one helped them. She spoke of a peaceful civilization that would be wiped out forever if someone did not act. When she finished, she hesitated for a long moment before sending the message. She was about to contact a species that the entire galaxy feared. If the Council learned what she had done, they would probably exile her. But as she thought of her people's fate, she pressed the transmission button. The message raced through space toward the blue-green death world called Earth. Kellerin could only wait and hope that somewhere among those dangerous humans, there might be someone with enough compassion to answer a desperate plea for help. She had no way of knowing that her message would reach Captain Jake Morrison at Luna Station, or that it would set in motion events that would change the galaxy forever. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee when the priority message arrived at Luna Station. The communication array had picked up something unusual, a transmission from deep space using an outdated diplomatic frequency that hadn't been used in years. Jake set down his coffee and walked to the main console, his boots echoing in the quiet command center. The message was in perfect standard Galactic, though it carried the musical accent of a species Jake didn't recognize. As he listened to the soft, pleading voice describing a peaceful people facing extinction, something stirred in his chest. He had heard plenty of distress calls in his 20 years of service, but this one was different. There was genuine desperation in the voice, and something else that reminded him of his own daughter back on Earth. Jake immediately forwarded the message to Admiral Lisa Carter at Earth Defense Force headquarters in Colorado. Within an hour, his communication console lit up with an incoming priority call. Admiral Carter's face appeared on the screen, her expression serious but determined. "Jake, I need you to verify this transmission and get me everything you can about these Zilani people," she said. "If this is real, we might have our first genuine first contact situation since the Proxima incident." "Already on it, Admiral," Jake replied. "The signal is definitely authentic coming from the direction of the Vega sector. I'm running a full analysis now." Admiral Carter nodded. "Good. I'm calling an emergency meeting with the Joint Chiefs. If there's a peaceful species about to be wiped out, we need to know about it." 3 hours later, Admiral Carter sat at the head of a conference table surrounded by Earth's top military leaders. General Kevin Brooks, commander of the Space Marines, leaned forward as the Zilani message played for the third time. Dr. Helen Parker, the Defense Force's chief xenobiologist, had her tablet out and was taking notes. "What do we know about this Korthak Empire?" Admiral Carter asked. Dr. Parker looked up from her tablet. "Based on the limited information we have from previous galactic transmissions, they're a militaristic species that conquers and enslaves other civilizations. They've been expanding across this region of space for several decades." General Brooks slammed his fist on the table. "And the galactic community just lets them do it?" "Apparently so," Dr. Parker replied. "From what I can gather, most species avoid confronting them directly. They seem to prefer negotiation and compromise, even when dealing with aggressors." Admiral Carter studied the star charts displayed on the wall screen. "How far is this Verdania system?" "About 3 weeks by hyperspace," answered Captain Danny Cooper, the fleet's navigation specialist. "It's right on the edge of what we consider our extended patrol range." "Ma'am, if I may," General Brooks interjected, "this sounds like exactly the kind of situation our forces were designed to handle. A peaceful civilian population facing extinction from military aggressors? We can't just sit here and do nothing." Around the table, heads nodded in agreement. Admiral Carter looked at each of her officers in turn. These were people who had spent their careers preparing to defend Earth and humanity's interests, but she could see something else in their faces now. They weren't just thinking about strategic interests or military objectives. They were thinking about innocent people who needed help. "Dr. Parker, what can you tell us about the Zilani themselves?" Admiral Carter asked. The xenobiologist consulted her tablet. "Based on the voice patterns and linguistic structure, they appear to be a highly developed but non-aggressive species. Their technology seems advanced, but they apparently have no military capabilities. The way the ambassador described their society suggests they're probably similar to Earth's more peaceful cultures. Like sheep surrounded by wolves," muttered Commander Ryan Davis, who had been quiet until now. Admiral Carter made her decision. "General Brooks, how quickly can you have the 3rd Marine Division ready for deployment?" "Give me 48 hours, ma'am," Brooks replied immediately. "Captain Cooper, I want our fastest ships prepared for an extended mission. We'll need medical supplies, engineering equipment, and enough firepower to make the Korthak think twice about their plans." As word of the mission spread through the Defense Force, something remarkable happened. The response wasn't just from the military. Engineers like Ben Tucker volunteered to help repair damaged infrastructure. Medical personnel such as Dr. Amy Johnson organized field hospitals. Even civilian contractors offered their services. The news eventually reached the general public, and the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with messages of support for the mission. Families of service members posted proud messages about their loved ones going to help. Strangers on the other side of the galaxy, religious leaders from every major faith called for prayers for both the Zilani people and the humans who would risk their lives to help them. Meanwhile, News of humanity's response reached the Galactic Council through their monitoring networks. High Counselor Zexmorn called an emergency session to discuss this unexpected development. The reptilian delegate's eyes glowed with anger as he addressed the assembly. "The humans are about to interfere in a matter that does not concern them," he hissed. "These deathworlders will only make the situation worse with their primitive violence." The Altarian representative nodded in agreement. "Perhaps we should contact the Korthak Empire and warn them about human involvement. It might prevent unnecessary escalation." But not everyone agreed. The delegate from the peaceful Etherian collective stood up slowly. "We had our chance to help the Zalani," she said quietly. "We chose to do nothing. Now others will act where we would not." Back on Earth, Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Liberty, as the massive vessel prepared for departure. Through the viewports, she could see the rest of the fleet assembling. Destroyers, cruisers, supply ships, and troop transports moved into formation with practiced efficiency. Captain Morrison's ship had been reassigned to the fleet, and he now stood at his station aboard the UES Defiance. Colonel Maria Santos was already aboard one of the troop transports with her Marines, running final equipment checks and briefing her officers on what they might face. As the fleet prepared to enter hyperspace, Admiral Carter opened a communication channel to all ships. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of command. "We're about to do something that no human force has ever done before. We're going to travel across the galaxy to help people we've never met, people who have nothing to offer us in return except their gratitude. Some of you might wonder why we're taking this risk for strangers." She paused, looking out at the stars that awaited them. "The answer is simple. It's because we're human, and humans help those who can't help themselves. Today we show the galaxy what that means." The fleet entered hyperspace, carrying Earth's warriors toward a distant world where innocent people waited for salvation that they never expected to come.